Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 646, Reigning Over Ignorance and Deception, Part 6. Take also the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim. The podcast objectives are: reveal the link between acceptance and effectual prayer, provide a summary of the whole armor of Elohim, analyze the sequence of your spiritual arsenal, and analyze the purpose of the sword of the Ruach. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the four corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcast or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us, for these are troubling times and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. Acceptance and the power of effectual prayer. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome back to our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we completed our analysis of the primary illustration of acceptance. Enter the key that unlocks the door to knowledge. Now, as you know, the prime objective of knowledge is to receive the will of Elohim. Ergo, by unlocking the door to knowledge, acceptance allows you to receive the will of Elohim, a key finding which reveals the following. Acceptance is the key to unlocking the power of effectual prayer. For effectual prayer is quite simply the transaction of the will of Elohim. And Yahuwah will not transact his will in your life if you refuse to accept his will for your life. No doubt, this is a crucial matter, for as you know, knowledge is the only power that can defeat ignorance and deception in spiritual warfare. Ergo, the man who is not receiving the will of Elohim is spiritually ignorant and being deceived. Now, we spent several months analyzing the great danger of ignorance and deception and how they push you to the point of no return within the progression of death. And now we have seen how knowledge reverses this great damage. As I say, we have seen how knowledge pushes you to a point of no departure within the progression of life. which would confirm that knowledge is the pinnacle of power and our greatest weapon in spiritual war. Ergo, we must analyze the role of knowledge as it pertains to the whole armor of Elohim. For this is the only way that we can reign over ignorance and deception, seeing as many matters are not as they seem. Let's get started. Put on the whole armor of Elohim. Now, as you know, we have analyzed 4 of the 6 weapons in the whole armor of Elohim in prior podcasts. And if you consider the passage of interest, you should identify them very easily. Ephesians 6:10-18 is revealing, put on the whole armor of Elohim, for you to have power to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against authorities, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Because of this, take up the whole armor of Elohim, so that you have power to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand then, having your loins girded with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having your feet fitted with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, having taken up the shield of faith, with which you shall have power to quench all the burning arrows of the wicked one. Take also the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim, praying at all times with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, watching with all perseverance and supplication for all the set apart ones. Now, within this passage, we can see the 6 weapons in the whole armor of Elohim. Not only this, but we can also see 2 commands we have been given to ensure that we consistently succeed in spiritual warfare. Now, commencing with the whole armor of Elohim, I have recorded these 6 weapons in the table below. Here again, we have already analyzed 4 of the 6, and yet I would like to conduct a brief review before moving on to the 5th. Now, the first weapon in your spiritual arsenal is the shield of faith, which is designed to guard every facet of your being. We know this because your mind is the gateway into your soul, and this is where faith is stationed in spiritual warfare. Now, if you would like to learn more about the shield of faith, check out End Times 354, Maintaining Your Victory Over Doubt, Part 4, which was posted on October 16th, 2024. And you will see how vital the shield of faith is in spiritual war. Now, the second weapon in your spiritual arsenal is the helmet of salvation, which is designed to guard your mind. This is crucial, for your mind is the primary battlefield as it pertains to spiritual warfare, which is why you need a helmet to guard you. Not only this, but you also need a helmet to guide you. Here is why. The only way you can succeed in spiritual warfare is by understanding the strategy for the battle and by navigating the way of escape. And these are communicated to you via the helmet of salvation. Now, if you would like to learn more about the helmet of salvation, check out End Times 394, Maintaining Your Victory Over Disobedience and Doubt, Part 4, which was posted on December 27th, 2024. And you will see how vital the helmet of salvation is in spiritual war. Now, the third weapon in your spiritual arsenal is the breastplate of righteousness, which is designed to guard your heart. This is crucial because your heart is a danger zone when it comes to spiritual warfare. To wit, once your heart is captured, the battle is, for all intents and purposes, over. Therefore, I admonish you to guard your heart, for out of it are the issues of life and the issues of death. Now, if you would like to learn more about the breastplate of righteousness, check out End Times 446, Reigning Over Contempt, Part 6, which was posted on April 7th, 2025. And you will see how the breastplate of righteousness has the power to keep you alive. Now, the fourth weapon in your spiritual arsenal is the girdle of truth, which empowers you to navigate the way of escape. Now, it goes without saying that we have spent more time analyzing this weapon than all the others. Here is why. The girdle of truth activates every weapon within the whole armor of Elohim. Ergo, the man who is not walking in the truth may have many weapons in his arsenal, but he is not able to use even one. Now, if you would like to learn more about the girdle of truth, check out End Times 495, Reigning Over Prejudice, Part 5, which was posted on June 27th, 2025. And you will see how the girdle of truth empowers you to succeed and to thrive. Why you must follow the sequence. Now, this brings us to the sword of the Spirit, the fifth of the six weapons in the whole armor of Elohim. No doubt, there are many things to be said about this weapon, and we should start by considering where it falls in the order. Along these lines, there are four other weapons you must unlock before you can unlock the sword of the Ruach. Not only this, but you must unlock them in accordance with the Tehudah of Yahushua Messiah. Now, you can see this by the image to the left, to wit, the man who is not walking in obedience to the will of Elohim can in no wise walk in the fear of Elohim, and only a fool would try. And after all this time, you should know why. Ergo, obedience precedes the fear of Elohim and the Tehudah of Yahushua Messiah. Ergo, one must unlock the helmet of salvation before he can unlock the girdle of truth. For, as I say, the truth will not be given to one who will not obey. Facts. Now, this is plain to see if you consider how the sword of the Ruach corresponds to the level of knowledge, and it gives you the power to translate the word of Elohim into your reality. This begs the question, would Yahuwah provide you spiritual license to operate with the most powerful weapon in his arsenal if A, you don't fear him, B, you are spiritually defiled, C, you refuse to obey him, and D, you have no faith in him? Of course not. Ergo, as you labor to unlock the whole armor of Elohim, you must never forget that you are dealing with the highest order of the spiritual sciences, and there is a sequence to this order. Ergo, you must give yourself to following this sequence, for this is even more important than doing your best. For there is a way that seems right to a man, but the end is certain, and certainly death. To change the reality of our world. Now, that said, let's talk about the purpose of the sword of the Ruach. That is, to translate the word of Elohim into your reality. Now, this makes perfect sense, for the sword of the Ruach corresponds to the level of knowledge. To wit, you cannot translate the word of Elohim into your reality if you have no knowledge of the word of Elohim. Here lies the inflection vis-a-vis many have heard the word of Elohim, but only a very small minority of men and women, past and present, have ever truly operated in the knowledge of Elohim. Here is why. The word of Elohim does not translate into knowledge just because you hear the word. Quite the contrary. The word of Elohim is like a seed that can only produce good fruit in a heart where the good seed of the word can take root. My dear friends, we see this clearly in the parable of the sower found in Matthew 13, 1 through 23. To wit, Yahushua is he who is sowing the good seed of the word of Elohim, which can only bear good fruit if it falls upon good ground. That said, the question of the hour is quite simply this: how do you ensure that your soul is depicted by good ground? The answer is sure, by following the Torah and the Tehudah of Yahushua Messiah. For as he is the perfect man, he is also the perfect example of a mind and a heart that are depicted by good ground. Now, we can use the Tehudah to prove this matter. To wit, when a man hears the word of Elohim, by faith he will believe in the word, and by obedience he will follow the word, if his mind is depicted by good ground. Not only this, but by virtue he will choose the word, making the will of Elohim his treasure. And by the fear of Elohim, he will submit to the word, which opens a door for him to receive knowledge of the word. Praise Yah. Now, the sum of these matters harden the central premise. That is, the vast majority of men and women everywhere are operating outside of the knowledge of Elohim. And we know this to be true after everything we have learned in phase 2. Along these lines, we invested 10 podcasts analyzing the assault against the word of truth in these last days. And if you recall, this assault is designed to prevent men and women from unlocking the power to receive the will of Elohim. Now, as you know, the texts are the easiest and the most strategic target. Why? It's because the texts contain the good seed of the word and the knowledge of the will of Elohim. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, despite the shortcomings of the text as a physical manuscript, the good seed of the word is concealed within the text. And everyone who is led by the set apart spirit has the power to receive the unlimited value of the good seed. Praise Yah. Now, as for the rest, false prophets, false Hebrews, blind goats, and petty fools, the God of this age has deceived them into throwing away the most powerful weapon in the whole armor of Elohim. For the texts are a primary source and validation of the word of Elohim. My dear friends, just consider the alternative. Imagine a world where there were no Bibles and, in effect, no texts. In doing so, I would ask, what would be the single source of truth to validate our beliefs? The answer is sure. There would be none. Look here. If there were no Bibles or texts, every false prophet and every false fool would speak the insane matters of their insane minds. They're doing it even now, and we have the text. Now, that said, imagine how much worse it would be if there were no spiritual source for validating our beliefs. Listen to me. Not only would every man do what is right in his own eyes, but there would be no single source of truth to tell him that what he is doing is not right. Now, let me tell you something. A physical artifact does not have to be 100% true to be a source of truth. The same goes for the ministers of Elohim in the earth. As I say, no man is a single source of truth, and no man is complete in the knowledge of Elohim. And yet, despite our shortcomings, the Most High will use us as instruments of truth to edify his assembly of righteousness. And only a fool would presume that Yahuwah does not have the power to achieve the same results with the texts, which are infinitely more reliable and accurate than any man, despite the constant attacks they have been subjected to. And thus, we conclude the one who is throwing away the text is an insane fool who is sealing his fate with endless death. Facts. Now, even though many are throwing away the text in rebellion to the Most High Elohim, to suggest that the masses are throwing away the sword of the Ruach is somewhat of a misnomer. Why? It's because these rebels have never possessed the sword of the Ruach, for it is a power they cannot understand. And so they can throw away the Bible however they please. But as for the sword of the Ruach, they have never held it in their hands. We know this because A, they have not unlocked any of the weapons that precede the sword of the Ruach, and B, the texts are not equated to the sword of the Ruach. Remember, the texts are a physical artifact that largely contain the good seed of the word of Elohim. However, that good seed will have no power in your life if it does not take root. And you can tell who is truly operating in that power by paying close attention to the quality and the quantity of their fruit. Now, here lies the inflection and the most crucial aspect of this matter, vis-a-vis the purpose of the sword of the Ruach is to translate the word of Elohim into your reality. And that reality will be manifested by various degrees of power and an overflow of good fruit. My dear friends, hear me carefully as I say, this is the only way the will of Elohim can be effected in our lives. And it is the only way the rule of Elohim can be effected in the earth. To wit, the true disciples of Yahushua Messiah must take up the sword of the Ruach, and by the power of Elohim, we must use it to change the reality of our world. Now, here lies the connection vis-a-vis the path we must follow to change the reality of our world. Not only requires the sword of the Ruach, as I say, it also requires the power of prayer, which is the key to obtaining knowledge. And for the sake of high time, we will table this discussion for now, and we will pick it back up in 2 days. So stay with me if you're with me, and in 2 days, we will see what the Ruach has to say. As always, stay locked in, watch and pray, and Yahuwah bless you until then. Now, here is the final word. The most foolish thing I ever heard was villains and thieves who threw away the word. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, it was one thing when we discussed the insanity of false Hebrews who are throwing away divine scripture because they are stumbling at the text. But it is something quite different when you see how they are also throwing away the sword of the Ruach, for in it lies the power of life and death. As I say, the only way we can live is if we make the word of Elohim our reality. And that requires knowledge of the word. And thus, I'll say it again. The tragic tale of villains and thieves throwing away the truth is the most insane thing I have ever heard. Heretofore, I recommend don't be deceived into throwing away the text, for wherever there is truth, you will surely find it. All you need is the sword of the Ruach to rightly divide and then divine it. Selah. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson. And if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com. And I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 646, Reigning Over Ignorance and Deception, Part 6. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 647, Reigning Over Ignorance and Deception, Part 7. I will post this podcast on Wednesday, April 29th, 2026. Until then, my friends, Continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch. Continue to pray. Continue in fasting. And most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.